Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching Leaf by Leaf and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025. As always with these beginning of the year videos, I will do a couple of things primarily. One, I'll glance backward at the previous year, 2024, talk about some highlights. I will open up the subscriber wildcard pick. If you don't know what that is, just hang on 1 second because I'll probably end up doing that right off the bat once I'm done with this little preamble. I will, of course, do the Leaf by Leaf awards ceremony. So whereas a lot of people will do like their top 10 or their top 5 books, what I like to do is have these categories like most emotionally impactful and like strangest book. I don't think that's really one of them, but you get the gist. So that there are these like very specific categories. And then these books here, which are all winners from last year's reading, will have those awards given to them. And then I'll talk a little bit about my plans for this year, which are going to be pretty drastic compared to all previous years. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started by opening up the subscriber wildcard pick. What this is an opportunity for you to cast one vote, the title of a book, in the comments, and in about a week or two, I will go in, take all of the comments, shuffle them up, randomly select a winner, and I will commit to reading that book and doing a video about it within 2025. So last year's winner of the subscriber wildcard pick was Suttree by Cormac McCarthy. So have at it. Whatever book you would love for me to do a video on this year, throw it in there in the comments. One title, one entry per person. So a couple of highlights from the channel from 2024. First of all, I started the Leaf by Leaf Author Talks series, and I kicked that off with Adam Levin talking about the reissue from McSweeney's of his book, The Instructions. That video was a ton of fun. I love talking to Adam Levin, and if you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out. Who cares what I say in it? It's more just how Adam's character really comes through. He's so much more than just an author. He's a great person and just really funny, honestly. I also then did an author talks with Debbie Urbanski and her debut novel, Afterworld. And then Ed Park was my third episode with Same Bed, Different Dreams. And it just so happens that both Ed Park and Debbie Urbanski both have short story collections coming out this year. So that's pretty neat. As with most previous years, there was something that came along unexpectedly that kind of swept aside all of my grand plans and sort of imposed itself on my year. In 2023, that was the invitation to come and give a presentation at the David Foster Wallace Conference in Gettysburg. Last year, it was the invitation to be one of the judges for the U.S. Republic of Consciousness Prize. And this is actually still going on. We are days away from launching to the world our 10 title long list, which will then go down to a 5 title shortlist next month, and then finally the winner in March. So that has been really exciting, but because of all of the books and all of the demands on my time, I had to kind of push a lot of stuff aside and make room for it. A couple of anniversaries happened. This channel turned 5 years old, and I posted a video about that, and I received a ton of amazing praise and support and just really nice comments and feedback, and I so appreciate being on this fun adventure with all of you. And then I myself turned 40 and got the incredible chance to go with my family to Paris to celebrate, and this was extremely rewarding. And it just so happens that because of an incredible patron of this channel, supporter of what I do, I'm actually getting the opportunity to go back to Paris in March of this year, and I hope to share some of it with you and perhaps take some video footage and post something here. Last year, I read 113 books, which is sort of mind-blowing. I can't even believe it myself. I think the most I've ever read in 1 year is about 120. But the average is hovering a little below 100. And out of those, about 45 were for the literary prize. This year, it's going to be a lot less, I can tell you that, but an incredible year and a lot of great books. Out of all that, because I couldn't make any videos on the books I was reading, or rather because I chose not to make any videos on the books I was reading for the prize, I only made 26 videos on books last year. And so my trend has kind of been going down and will continue this year. So before I open up the award ceremony, I'll just go ahead and jump into 2025 plans. I've been thinking a lot about finding a better balance in my life and things like that, and limiting my commitments. And so this year, what I plan to do is to make 12 main videos. So instead of making a video for every book I read that I feel compelled to make a video about, what I will do is I will make one video for each month, basically. So there will be one book for each month for which I do a video. And right now I'm planning on posting that the last Friday of each month to kind of give you some consistency to work with and some expectation. But because of this, cutting it down to basically one video a month, of course, I'll have to be extremely selective about the book for that video. The only exceptions or additions to this will be, of course, the subscriber wildcard pick. Of course, it could be pretty wild if the pick ends up coinciding with one of the books that I have planned for one of the 12 videos, but let's just say it will probably be in addition to. And then also a Christmas present video at the end of the year, such as I've been doing for the last few years. And I have a couple of ideas of what that's going to be. I also have ideas on what each of these 12 videos are going to be, but I won't be announcing it, so hopefully it'll be a nice surprise and something, you know, I'm picking these things, of course, with a lot of the feedback from all of you that I've gotten over the years and kind of what you like to hear about from me. This, of course, I think will also go a long way to hopefully unburdening a lot of your feeds and information and things that you feel like you need to get around to, instead of bombarding you with videos, just cutting it down and giving one a month with an eye towards being deliberate and selective and quality. You know, I think will help us all not feel like there's just too much to get around to, and so we're always behind the mark. All right, so welcome to the 2025, or I guess it would be the 2024 Leaf by Leaf award ceremony. So a couple of rules, some of which I'm bending this year, but what I typically do is I have these categories that I reuse each year. I also have a rule that the book has to have a video on the channel from the previous year. In this case, I'm bending that once or twice for the categories, just because of me taking a break from the channel to attend to all of the reading for the literary prize. I wasn't able to deepen the pool of videos enough from last year to feel like I had enough to spread out and make the categories and the selections exciting. So I hope that you'll give me this liberty on a couple of the categories. But anyway, best debut novel has to go to Afterworld by Debbie Urbanski. And again, I have a review video on this, and I have a talk with Debbie Urbanski. So if you're interested in it, if you've taken a look at it, check out those videos. I felt this was an incredible work of art. Best big book goes to The Tunnel by William H. Gass. And some of you are aghast right now, thinking, why is that not the best book of the year? Well, yeah, I had to really look over these categories. I should say that this year, unlike any previous years, each category, there were several titles that were kind of elbowing each other, and it was really tough to select these. But overall, as I really thought through it, I just felt like this one placed itself best in my best big book category. And of course, you may be aware this was my big mega video ender, just a little over 10 hours long for last year. I stand by it as probably the best work I've done, not in terms of the video production, but in terms of the content and what I learned from this book and shared with you all. So hopefully for those of you that are interested in going on this dig, you're getting something or will get something out of that video. For everyone else, I apologize. Of course, if there's a best big book, you've got to have a best little book, and this one was easy. It's definitely Sheila Heti's Pure Color. This one blew me away, and if you go watch my video on it, you'll see that really this is where art triumphs over criticism, because I was nearly speechless by this book. It rendered my critical faculties inferior to just sitting back and just being in awe of what Heti pulled off here in this book. Best poetry, I'm going with Wrong Norma, even though it's sort of a hybrid. There's poetry, there's translations. You know, if you've read Carson, you know that it only in certain cases is it clear-cut poetry, but indisputably Wrong Norma by the great Anne Carson. Best short fiction goes to Wendy Walker's Stories out of O. Marie. I love these little green integer editions. This is just a wonderful and rich tapestry of language and image. This is where I'm bending the rules a little bit. And this category is interesting because it's best fiction. And so to me, fiction is this whole array of categories that goes into an overall piece of fiction. And for this year, it has to go to Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I read this in the unabridged Penguin edition. It's like 1,500 pages long. I was never bored. I was going to do a video on this last year, but I just did not have the time to. I may, however, be able to pull off a video on it this year in tandem with something else. And but I couldn't believe how amazing this was in every facet of what makes great fiction. Best nonfiction has to go to Vita Contemplativa by Byung-Chul Han. I've got a video. Well, of course I do. Well, wait. No, I probably should specify because the one previous I didn't have a video technically. Don't have a video. But I do on this one, and then also the Burnout Society. Byung-Chul Han is starting to really blow up. You may have seen, there was even a New Yorker article about the title was like the internet's favorite philosopher or something like that from last year. But Han has his hand on something very critical and serious in our culture right now, and is really has a torch to guide us out. I'm getting so much out of his work. Best literary criticism has to go to Reading the World, Cormac McCarthy's Tennessee Period by Diane C. Luce. It'll be really interesting to see what Luce and other McCarthy scholars have to say now that some new things have come to light. But as far as preparation for my Suttree video and just enjoying great, deep, rich scholarly criticism, Diane Luce is wonderful. Most fun, the most fun I may ever have had reading fiction goes to Charlie Kaufman's Ant Kind. I tried not to overplay the humor in my video on this one, but I mean, honestly, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. Most innovative goes to Ha by Gordon Shepherd, and this is like a documentary in text form about Hubert Aquin. And Hubert Aquin also was quite an amazing discovery for me in 2024, and I read everything that he had published and had been translated into English, and then got my hands on next episode in French thanks to a good friend in Canada who found it at a bookstore. So thank you for that. And also, I can't remember. Oh, it was that same friend who put Ha on my radar. So You know who you are. Thank you very much. Most innovative, best innovative goes to Ha. Most emotionally impactful goes to Marlon Haushofer's The Wall. And as a lot of you told me, once I posted my video on this, there's also apparently a very good film. And so I want to get around to that. But this one just grabbed me by the throat and did not let go. Most intellectually impactful goes to Benjamin Labatut's The Maniac. This was incredible, about von Neumann, but I had read his other book before this one, and so I was already primed for something great, and then this even exceeded that. And it just so happened that I had read or watched the AlphaGo documentary on YouTube like a week or two before reading this. I highly recommend that you do the same, or at least shortly thereafter. But this is, along with Oppenheimer and The Maniac, will really kind of expand and explode your brain a little bit, just in terms of not, well, yeah, complexity, but in terms of the things that we've pulled off and where things are headed. I do not normally give multiple awards to the same book, but in this case I have to. Most aesthetically impactful goes to The Tunnel by William H. Gass. Best cover goes to that reissue of the Instructions by Adam Levin, put out by McSweeney's, and it's got this cool little band around it, and there's this incredible artwork. I mean, there's just, as soon as I saw it, I knew, oh, that one is going to win Best Design for these awards. My best reread for last year goes to Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Best book I still can't figure out, Blue Lard by Vladimir Sorokin. Translated, of course, by Max Lawton. And, you know, it's a little bit, I feel kind of wrong-headed saying best book I still can't figure out, because as Max talks about in his extraduction and others have talked about, there's nothing really to figure out here. But I'll be honest that really reading it wasn't as jarring as I was set up for it to be. And I was actually going to do a video on this one. I have lots of notes here. I even wrote out 2 pages of an outline because honestly I had a lot of fun reading this book. And because the first 100 pages have a lexicon that you have to kind of flip back and forth to look up the words, but then eventually you start to, you know, load some of them in short-term memory, I felt like it really pulled me into the act of participation, not only with the author, but with the translator. I became a translator of sorts, and there was this really neat triangle there going on, and so much else. But I really enjoyed the journey and didn't find it as, well, yeah, it's out there. I mean, it's outlandish, but it's not totally confusing or totally disorienting. Like there felt like there was a pretty good point of departure and then a thread that pulled you along. But the other great thing about this book is that British GQ listed it as one of their best beach reads for last year. That's amazing. Best book in translation I'm giving to The House of Paper by Carlos Maria Dominguez. All right, so here it is. Favorite book of the year. My favorite book overall. Yes, I'm gonna have to go with Suttree by Cormac McCarthy. So, as I do like the last couple of years, I follow up my favorite book of the year with favorite book of the year that isn't Suttree. And for that, I'm gonna have to go with When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut. Same author as The Maniac. Outstanding work. And now I want to just give a few honorable mentions. I don't know if I've ever done this before, and I was planning on doing videos on these books, but like I said, I just did not have time, and it's very unfortunate. But who knows what the future holds? But I reread The Plague by Albert Camus last year, and for the first bit of it, I was as ambivalent as I was the first time I read it many years ago. But then the back half of it really sort of caught me off guard, and there was a depth there that I hadn't grasped before. But this is something else, and it makes me want to read it in maybe the updated American English translation that came out just a few years back. Also, Jean-Paul Sartre, Nausea, La Nausée. I read this. I read a handful of French books preparing for my trip to Paris last year, but this was outstanding. I had also read this many years previously and got a lot out of it, but I have everything prepped to do a video, so maybe at some point. Late last year, I finally got around to this, and it was interesting kind of how this went, because I had read Annihilation by Michel Houellebecq, and he talks, as he's talked in other books, about how the Germans invented Romanticism, and that and a couple other things really put that historical marker on my mind. And I remembered I had this book. It's a nonfiction book by Andrea Wulf, and it's called Magnificent Rebels, The First Romantics and the Invention of the Self. And it talks all about that sort of late 18th century milieu in Jena in Germany with Goethe and Schiller and Fichte and Novalis and on and on and on, the Jena set, as Wolf calls it. And this actually, it read like a novel. I loved this book. She looked at everything that came out of that and how it really did establish Romanticism. And Romanticism is something I've always been drawn to ever since in college we studied the Big Five in British Romantic poetry. And of course then the American Transcendentalists, especially Emerson and Thoreau, really gripped me early on. And this was a wonderful book, and perhaps, I will still be able to do a video. Some of you may have seen that I asked for pronunciation help, and one of you, Enrica, reached out and gave me pointers on all of these names and so on. So thank you so much for that. Also, A Cage Went in Search of a Bird. These were 10 Kafka-esque short stories. Again, I had all this prepped and ready to do a video. These are wonderful stories, and it gives you some insight into contemporary writing that's going on in contemporary writers, which I have trouble staying in touch with. You may have also noticed that Paul Wilson of The Moose and the Gripes reached out to me, and if you go and listen to their year-ending podcast, you'll find that I share some remarks on this. So thank you for that invitation again, Paul. I think the very last book that I read in 2024 was The Philosophy of Translation by Damien Searles. And this was excellent. I haven't read many books about translation. I've read the George Steiner book about translation. I've read Le Tombeau de Margot, In Praise of the Music of Language, and maybe one other that isn't coming to my mind right now. But anyway, this is one of those books where it is very tight in terms of what you would expect from a university press, and something that has the title, of course, The Philosophy of Translation. But it actually has a lot of enthusiasm, and it's infectious. By the time I was done reading it, I was having fantasies about doing translations of my own. But this is really a treat to read, and it's not just for people who are translators or are interested in translators. It's really beneficial, I think, to anybody who's a reader, especially when you're reading works in translation. And finally, Shakespeare and Company, A History of the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart. I got this book there at Shakespeare and Company when I was in Paris, and I got the cool stamp in the front of it, just like they do at City Lights Books. And I learned that they're actually sort of like brother bookstores. Lawrence Ferlinghetti and George Whitman were good friends, and it's got these awesome photos all throughout, and all of these, just this ephemera from these archives that have been dug out and just describes the whole history from Sylvia Beach and the original Shakespeare and Company, and then George Whitman and his journey with it, all the way to now his daughter Sylvia Whitman, and she ends it with a very heartfelt and wonderful essay. So this, of course, has lots of sentimental value because of being tied to my trip, but also as you read it, it just brings to life an era of literature in Paris that is still very emblematic today. So that's it. Welcome to 2025. I hope you will enjoy the content this year, and I appreciate, as always, all of your support, all of your kind words. Thank you for all of the recommendations you've given me, all of the help with pronunciation, and just expanding my knowledge of what's out there, and just overall making life that much more rich. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful year.